Thanks everyone for tuning in today, and thanks to our panelists for joining us live as well. I'm Phil McDonald, Product Manager at Google for New Measurement Solutions. So today we're going to talk about how we measure more value with estimated total conversions. And just to give you a little bit of background, we recently conducted research that shows that consumers are spending 15 hours per week researching on their phones. And half of those consumers said they wanted to purchase in less than an hour of that research. So we're presented with constantly connected consumers and who are connecting with businesses in new and different ways and have many more touch points. A conversion is no longer just a sale on your website. It now maybe happens over the phone. It might happen in store. It might happen through an app download in your app. It might even happen still on your website, but just having multiple touch points through all these different devices. And so this is really complex. And over the last 6 months, I've talked to over 100 advertisers, both big advertisers and small ones too. And I've heard sort of a consistent message. So what we've been hearing is that being able to measure all of these different touch points is really, really exciting for advertisers. However, obviously it's super challenging as well. And so now they're tasked with trying to grow their business and measure all of these different types of conversions. So this afternoon we brought together 3 of the industry's online marketing leaders to share insights with you in 3 main areas. First, how the changing consumer behaviors are impacting the business they manage. Second, how businesses are addressing these challenges and obviously sometimes opportunities with measurement, attribution, and budgeting solutions. And third, how these new insights and changes to the way they value their online ads are positively influencing the business outcomes that they're actually driving. So before we get too deep into the weeds, let's introduce our marketing leaders. So Rachel, I'm going to start with you. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Rachel Schnorr, VP of Paid Search at RKG, a Merkle company. We are a data-driven, tech-enabled customer relationship marketing agency. On the RKG side of things, we service about 180 clients, and we provide them data-driven insights for paid search, SEO, social, feeds, and comparison shopping engines, and display. So I head up our team of paid search, and so I'm excited to talk to you guys about some of the considerations and conversations that we've had with our clients around cross-device and around mobile.
And then RJ, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Definitely. First of all, pleasure to be here. I'm coming to you from iProspect, our Boston office. Here at iProspect, I am a data and insights manager. And just to give you some background on iProspect, if you haven't heard of us already, we are a global digital marketing agency, and we have clients across a wide variety of verticals, and we provide services such as paid search, SEO, display, feeds, and social. And so here, as a data and insights manager, I've had the fortunate opportunity to do a lot of testing across the clients that we have across the US. And so I'm very excited to dig into some of the insights that I've heard throughout this past year and kind of talk to you about some of the upcoming strategies that we have in store.
And John-Mark, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is John-Mark Purcell, and I'm with Merkle in their New York office. I work on the search team within the retail vertical. I've spent a lot of time in the last year talking with our clients and trying to understand within the client the different departments that are all responsible for these different touch points and trying to bring them together to understand how the search campaigns can drive value for each of them and helping unlock a KPI that is appropriate and one that shows not only how this is contributing, but how we can also affect that change to increase the velocity and the scale of the value that we're providing, whether it's last click revenue or whether it's traffic in the store. So it's across the devices and the channels. So I'm excited to talk about this.
Great. So first, before we get into actual measurement and the details of that, let's first just talk about the consumer behavior. So I'm just going to tell you a story about what I did last week. Last week I bought a TV, and so the path to purchase for me, and I sort of reflected afterwards, was actually fairly complex, right? So I went through and first of all, I clicked on a few ads as I was researching different TVs, different places I could buy them, etc. I went to a lot of different sites. I went to a bunch of mobile sites when I was first getting started and sort of familiarizing myself with the different options, doing some background research and reading when I had time. I went to desktop sites, etc. I even used my tablet once. And I even went to the store, so I won't say which store, but I went to a store and looked around and kind of saw the TVs and could see the different pixels and all these different things. And then I ended up actually buying it online from my laptop. And so that's a fairly complex journey, but I think it's also fairly typical. As a marketer, this behavior can be extremely challenging to measure, obviously, because of all the different touch points. So let's turn it over to a panelist to discuss. So first, can you just tell us a bit about how you are seeing consumer behavior changing, sort of like my story, and how it impacts the businesses that you work with? Rachel, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, it's changed quite a bit. Just like you said, I think it's very fragmented now across different devices. There's always been the challenge, obviously, of losing some tracking as a person navigates around, but it's even more complex now. And I think more so than that, just mobile devices have really changed consumer behavior in the way that they shop, the way they interact with companies, and the way that they make a connection. Mobile really enables social, and that's kind of a whole nother side of things. So, yeah, it's a challenge to track all of that, and within one channel, but certainly across many channels too. It's definitely helpful to have the cross-device tracking functionality that Google has made available now. That is a great step that allows us to finally tie those dots, at least, okay, in paid search, what is this looking like? So that's very helpful to have conversations about budgets or efficiency targets or really seeing the full value. But really, you need to look across all of the other channels too. Social, needs to be tied in with that, and certainly in-store for brick-and-mortar retailers. So there's a lot of pieces and a lot of factors, and it's hard to tie it all together, but it's important.
Yep, I'd love to jump in next if that's all right. So kind of relating this back to your story, as we know, people are using their mobile devices when they are in the consideration phase for purchase, and that's really been a large mobile. We've always been talking about it's going to be the year of mobile, but mobile's on the rise, and what we can see now is that there is significant opportunity within the mobile space, and it's a space that we can no longer really ignore. Between the past year, we've seen some huge gains in investment, especially within the SEM and PLA channels. Year over year, throughout Q3, we've actually seen that our clients have grown our spend in mobile by 86%. And we've also generated 53% more clicks across our clients between Q3 2013 and Q3 2014. So the opportunity is out there, and we're doing our best to definitely take advantage of it. Just to give a benchmark in terms of overall performance that we've seen from mobile, we've typically seen mobile across some of our top retail clients drive for the device 25% of impressions, 35% of clicks, but then here's where the hiccup is. It's only driving 8% of last click conversions. And so as you can tell, based on that traffic, mobile has a much lower conversion rate if you're looking at it from a last click perspective. So to Phil's point, we really need to start looking at this, not just by last click, but to understand how mobile is really impacting the overall process and figure out throughout that journey, where can we collect that data to build into our systems so our client teams can optimize based on that data. And so kind of pulling the full picture together, back last year, February 2013, iProspect and Google partnered to do a case study for Adidas, where based on historical information regarding in-store visit behavior on their mobile device to if the user, once they clicked into a store locator, did they go to the store and make a purchase? That was at least one way where a client team was able to utilize some of that information and assign a value to a behavior that somebody had on their mobile device and tie it back to real, tangible revenue. But where we are today, I feel is where it's very exciting time to be in mobile since more data than ever is being available. So what we're trying to do is what are those points in real time where we can collect revenue and tie that back to our systems to look at mobile differently than we do for desktop and tablet, to tie it back to our conversion processes, as well as the communication that we have for the client on how mobile is impacting their overall strategy.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and on our side we've seen many of the same stats where the level of volume and how much traffic is coming from mobile devices is obviously increasing as people not only as more mobile phones are available and the market for that grows, but people's interactions with the phone is growing. They're searching more often because it's easier, so it's actually changing the behavior that they're taking. It's not just switching it where they used to search on their tablet and now they're searching on their mobile. They're actually increasing the volume of those searches. And what's interesting is when we're trying to think of this from that perspective is understanding once we have a look at where the different value is being driven and then attributing it properly, like mobile was involved in it or the app was involved, and then it's trying to understand what levers can we then pull to make that go even farther. Does the app and does the mobile side of the website, does it need to display the same type of information, or does it need to give something that is taking the context of the mobile device and then leveraging what we know about where the person is and other things to then display the right amount of information that's appropriate. So it's definitely changing not just the screen size, but the actual actions that they are trying to take.
And how is this sort of prompted you guys to change the way both you manage ads, mobile ads, but also the way in which your clients say like have a mobile website and a strategy there? How has that been for you guys?
Overall, what we've been doing is pulling. I mean, we've mentioned cross-device conversions a few times. One of the things that we're doing here at iProspect is ensuring that when we are setting our bid multipliers at AdWords, is that we're looking at those different conversion points and tying them all together within the total conversions column in order to assign value, and not looking at it just from a converted clicks, since what we've noticed, and one of the pitfalls that a lot of agency teams can fall under, is setting mobile based on that end ROAS and try to make it equal with desktop. And what we find happening is that mobile then becomes limited. All that opportunity that we were talking about before with 25% of impressions and 35% of clicks drops for those customers to about that 1% level, and that really just shows that we're not taking advantage of the space because of the way that we're measuring it. And so by being able to pull in those different metrics in order to boost up mobile, because we know it's assigning value, it's there. You may have not purchased the TV had you not been looking on your mobile device. And so we are trying our best to make sure that we're capturing those moments that indicate value into our decision-making behavior, so that we're not limiting our average positioning on mobile based on a very severe bid multiplier.
Makes a lot of sense. That's really interesting that you point out. I don't know if you guys have any others, but I was thinking some other strategies that that you guys have actually seen people try, or and that haven't worked, maybe. I think that's really interesting for people if you guys have any.
Yeah, I think similar to RJ, we definitely try to consider what other, and we kind of refer to them as micro conversions. What other actions are people taking on mobile? Because mobile is really not a primary, it's not primarily a purchase channel. It's very important for research. We are seeing it, become more of a purchase channel, and as the screen sizes continue to increase, that it will be interesting to follow that trend. But it's important to consider, like you said, the things other than last click. And we've seen advertisers in several cases, after looking at least Google's cross-device data, and still just kind of even thinking about mobile at this point, we've seen that they're undervaluing mobile, by 10 to 15%. And so what that's led to for us is, increasing that efficiency target so that you can spend more. You made a great point about the average position, because that's even more critical on mobile since there's such a limited space. So it's sort of like you're either there or you're not. And so, I would say a challenge and something that does, I think prevent some from being able to do that is just constraints on budget, especially if that's something that was determined early on in the year. Mobile continues to grow. It's kind of hard to predict what it will be like at the end of the year, and so we definitely run up against budget constraints. As much as we would like to really be spending more on mobile and particularly as it comes into holiday, the importance of being there, not just from a branding, but from a research perspective, certainly if you have store considerations. But budget often does limit it, and it can be difficult to kind of get away from the bottom line and the last click ROAS and just show the other value that's coming from mobile. It really kind of depends on the company goals, and it can be difficult to kind of talk in that language, which is so different from the traditional ROAS language.
That makes sense.
Yeah, something that we've seen success with and as we've engaged with clients, talking about each keyword has a different amount of value. So typically on a large paid search campaign, you'll start that segmentation off by saying, what are the brand keywords that we're looking at? When are consumers looking for the brand of my client, and then when are they looking for the products that they sell, without mentioning the brand. And then once you take that view, you can look at those non-brand keywords and you can break out the different values that those keywords have, because they're going to have different costs, they're going to have different last click revenue. So something that might make sense from it's a great e-commerce product, it's easy to buy online, and people often do, is going to have great ROI. And then on top of that, you have this smaller piece that is saying, well, you actually are also selling these in stores, and we're driving either in-store traffic or we're driving calls after they see the ad and they're able to make the call to the closest location to them. But then you can take that assumed transaction and you get your conversion rate from your retail team saying, out of everybody that walks into a store, how many of them complete a transaction? And then you can say, okay, well, they came in on a certain set of keywords, maybe on the laptop set of keywords, meaning that average conversion value is going to be upwards of $1,000 versus someone who comes in on a backpack keyword where the conversion value is going to range from 25 to 50. And so you can kind of even get more granular, and you don't have to stay at that highest level of understanding where the value can be driven for the retail store.
Well, I think that's a great segue to talk about actual measurement and how we can do it across all these different types of conversions that we see. And so we've talked a lot about cross-device, so maybe we'll start there. And so, obviously we see this constantly connecting consumer interacting across a lot of different paths. And as a marketer, we need to account for this. So just to point in, this is some Google research that we have. So a recent study that we did showed that 90% of consumers that we surveyed actually switched between devices as they were actually trying to buy something. This is over a little bit of time, obviously. But 90% is a huge number. And for those not familiar with cross-device conversion tracking, which has been mentioned a couple times, the way it works is basically if you start your experience, say, searching on Google or even on our display network, click on an ad, and then later transact, actually make that purchase online on a different device. So say you might start on mobile and then end on desktop, and on that terminating device, you actually are not clicking an ad. That's where cross-device conversion tracking can help you measure and connect those dots. And so just as an example, you might be searching for jeans on your mobile phone, you click on an ad, and then you get to work, and you actually go and buy the jeans on your work desktop. So that would actually attribute the value for that desktop conversion, where you just directly navigated to the site to that original mobile click. So so anyway, it's been really interesting. One thing, at Google, we have sort of two things that we take very seriously around cross-device. First is privacy of users, and then the second is accuracy of the data. And so on the privacy side, we're very careful to aggregate and anonymize all the data that we report. And then on the accuracy side, we're also very careful to only share metrics if we're extremely confident in that actual data that we have. So we have to be 95% certain that it's within a very tight bound. And so let's hear about how our panelists have actually been using cross-device conversion tracking in your business. I think it'd be really interesting. John Mark, you want to start?
Yeah, definitely. One of the interesting aspects of working with a large national retailer is you get to see how they have these different large marketing segments. There's a team involved for the national branding campaign. There's the e-commerce site that is supported with a e-commerce marketing team, and then you have marketing teams that are actually for regions in each individual store. So these individual marketing teams have different goals and different KPIs. The e-commerce one is very last click focused. They're interested in understanding the value that we add to the business as a whole, but it's not as helpful for them in making day-to-day budgeting decisions. Whereas for the national branding campaign or the local marketing campaigns, helping them understand what we do for those stores individually and collectively allows them to then compare and contrast how this channel does as an efficiency metric versus other direct marketing like flyers or billboards or radio ads. And so what we use the cross-device conversion tracking for is to look at our metrics, obviously, and then basically add these on at the end to say, okay, all of the metrics that we can track are here, and then as we start adding on these additional ones, whether it's cross-device, computer to computer, or computer to tablet, computer to mobile, and then you can look at other additional metrics to add in to kind of create a calculated total value being provided, like non-brand to brand search, for example. And so we bring all those together, and we sort of have a different dashboard for the other marketing teams than the e-commerce one.
That's great. Rachel, I know you, I saw a blog post that you had done that I read about our own cross-device conversion tracking. Can you talk a bit about how your clients use this?
Sure, yeah. So from our research, we found that on average, cross-device conversions have added 7% to total conversions. And particularly when you look at this for mobile, it actually adds 14% to mobile. Something interesting to think about is, so smartphones contribute to about a quarter, 25% of cross-device conversions, whereas what we see is they only contribute 12% for single-device conversions. So they're weighing in more heavily on cross-device, though there's certainly multiple paths. It's not just those originating on mobile. You know, display cross-device conversions has also been recently introduced, and so we've seen a similar about 5 to 10% lift there. And you know, it's been really interesting for, you know, I mentioned we have clients that are, you know, increasing their mobile efficiency maybe by 10 to 15% in some cases because of this data. We've also seen a situation where the data actually varies by the segment of the site. So for a women's specialty retailer, we actually found that designer terms and designer clothes, where people are actually searching by name, perform differently than just generic terms. So we actually have different mobile adjustments and bids and efficiency targets there based on what we found. So that was kind of an interesting use case. But otherwise, we're certainly using this, talking to our clients about adjusting the efficiency target, adjusting the budget to have that presence in mobile, and then also specifically what that does for the mobile bid adjustments. We're making those, you know, through our system dynamically.
Excellent. I can kind of back up a little bit what Rachel's saying as well. Again, on our side, we've been seeing that mobile is indexing 2 to 3 times higher in terms of the benefit that cross-device conversions are giving to the overall value for mobile as compared to desktop and tablet. So similarly, what we've done is that we've taken that information and applied that to our mobile bid adjustments. We have a few tools on our side that client teams can automatically pull reports, filter in the data, and sort of do a health check on their mobile bidding. When we were kind of talking about the pitfalls before, I think there's kind of 2 main buckets. There's one, your mobile bid is too low and you're not taking advantage of opportunity, but also secondly as well, some client teams, their mobile bid's too high. They're participating in mobile when maybe it's not really a good fit. And so what we find really helpful is that pulling all this data together has been able for us to cut back in the right areas, but then also expand on others where we see cross devices really impacting the overall account.
That's great. And you know, obviously cross-device is a huge thing and something I'm sure you guys have seen impact advertisers across all sorts of different verticals, industries, etc. So that's really great. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and let's talk about measurement still, but from let's talk about in-store. or it doesn't necessarily need to be a store. It can be, you know, a bank or whatever, right? It can be anything. But so one thing we're seeing around in-store that I think is really interesting here is we actually see foot traffic down in the last year, and this is a consistent pattern. The funny thing is revenue's up, right? So you see less customers coming to the store, more purchases happening, which is kind of an ironic, funny thing, but not so unexpected if you actually consider that customers are oftentimes a lot more informed when they come to the store because they've actually visited the website before. Additionally, we see customers armed with smartphones today, and that's only been rising over the last couple of years. And so those people are able to actually answer the questions that stopped them from buying before, even when they're standing in the aisle, right? And so just a data point from some Google research. So we found that for 3 out of 4 shoppers who actually look for local information online, they're actually more likely to visit stores after doing so, after visiting the website. So, which is kind of aligns with all the data we've seen. So can you guys talk about how you've actually tailored your marketing efforts, either to measure in-store or even to drive people to store? And RJ, you want to start?
Sure, be happy to. So a few things that we've done. First off, when we're talking about localized strategy, if you have a retailer that only has a few store locations, one thing that we've done we found very successful is geo-segmenting out our campaign at the campaign level to target our stores individually and assign various bids based on that. What we've seen is that performance around stores, even online as well, is typically much higher, but it also allows us to play around with what we're doing from a site link level in terms of if there is something going on in that store, if there's an event, we're now able to promote it exclusively to that area and not having that one store event kind of impact our nationwide campaign. So that, first and foremost, has been very successful. We even, for one of our retailers, helped them with hiring jobs for a new store location as well. And had we not had our campaigns segmented out that way, we wouldn't have been able to narrow into that market, and particularly for that client. A few other things we've done as well, looking outside of Google, I mean, there are a lot of opportunities to connect the dot between online and offline, especially for retail, which is one of my favorite industries. Couponing is huge. I love to use coupons. Who doesn't love to save $1? So one thing that we've done is we've partnered with vendors out there that have been able to connect the dot between online performance and consumers making a purchase in store, and that data has been very helpful, especially in the CPG brand environment where there isn't a whole lot that you can track between the both of them. And so that's been one thing that we've used as a huge indicator on what keywords are working for which clients and really informing our budget decisions that way. One other test that we had ran as well was a softer test in terms of being able to tie performance, where we ran a geo-segmentation test where we were bid up aggressively in search across some geo markets, and we pulled back in others to see what the difference was in trending seasonality across the stores to understand, were we making an impact between those stores, or did we not see a lift in revenue that we would have expected to see regardless? What we saw was that a 2 times attribution rate between the retailer, the in-store purchase behavior was higher by $2 more than it was per every dollar spent, than in those markets where we had pulled back significantly with our spend. And so those are very strong indicators that the online efforts that we had really made an impact at the end of the day. And so that test was very helpful just to understand what we were doing and kind of a softer media mix analysis as well.
No, great points. I think what we've had success in a similar way when you're thinking about a local market is when you're able to target specifically around the radius of a store, you can start thinking about what are the types of keywords that you haven't been bidding on nationally, because as an e-commerce brand, it might not make sense to bid on certain types of keywords that have this very local intent and also this very intent that has timing built into it. If you're looking to print business cards now, advertising for, even advertising next day shipping or free shipping is not what that person's looking for. They're looking for those products right then. So as you are able to get more granular in your targeting, taking a second look at your keyword set to understand what are the types of keywords that my audience will be looking for that are specific to those stores and that mean a lot, have a very different intent when that person is within a few miles of that location. And then it actually has helped us to expand our keyword set when we are able to have those more targeted campaigns around the stores.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, those, even along with those considerations, you know, the opportunity to kind of tailor your ad copy even to say, you know, buy online, pick up in store, or, you know, if you're not near a store, kind of emphasizing that you can shop now and purchase easily online. Many different kind of ways that you can encourage consumers and show them different ways to buy and really speak to them in the mindset that they're in. We've definitely been looking at the you know, bid proximity information. We've been in a couple betas to be able to track what traffic looks like within 1 mile, half mile, 2 miles, what have you, from a store, and it's been really interesting to see those traffic patterns and you know, have the ability to adjust bids based on that, depending on the advertiser's goals. And we have, you know, for one large specialty retailer that has a lot of brick and mortar presence in malls, you know, we've been able to see that, particularly for the non-branded side of things, we've seen up to 5 times an increase in the sales when you factor in the in-store rather than just online. So all of that depends on your customer base and kind of where they're prone to shop, whether that be online or in-store. But it's very exciting to start to get visibility into that. And in the past, we've done some kind of printing out a coupon on the receipt and then being able to have the user kind of type in a response online and be able to match that to see if they've actually had some online activity too. So that's sort of what you were mentioning, RJ.
Yep.
So it's a very important factor.
That's great. And yeah, I mean, I think in-store is huge, and you know, definitely at Google we're investing a lot into new formats. You know, I mean, I think you guys talked about, you know, geo-targeting, and obviously that's really, really important here. Having precise locations helps us do that. But you know, new things like local inventory ads are hopefully super helpful to retailers to actually drive people to that store. And so, you know, we're obviously experimenting all the time with new formats and things like that to enable this, and new measurement technologies as well. So let's switch gears a little bit to calls, and let's talk about let's talk about how you guys are measuring calls, how that sort of impacts your businesses. You know, I see calls are really interesting. It's obviously somewhat advertiser specific, whether or not calls make sense. But a crazy stat from our side at Google, there are over 40 million calls made from Google Ads each month, which is nuts. If you think about that, there are, you know, 300 million people in the U.S., right? And you know, obviously this is a global stat, but still, that's a really, really high number of calls being made from mobile ads. And it's, so what that tells me is that it's clear that calls are super important to a number of different businesses. And you know, it's very important as to how we measure them, not just that they happen, but you know, were they good calls, were they bad calls? You know, how many of them happened? How long do they take? All that sort of thing. And for those that don't actually know already, in August we launched, in addition to all the call tracking type of capabilities we already have on mobile and desktop, we announced website call conversions. And so what this is let's say you have a search ad that brings somebody to your website. You're an insurance company, maybe car insurance company. You put a phone number on your website, and that actually is a Google call tracking number. So anytime someone calls that, you can actually link it back to the advertising that drove them to the website, and so that you can actually do the full end-to-end attribution and understand if, you know, that, based on what you consider a conversion, actually those advertising dollars that you spent to bring people to your website actually drove that end result of a call that you wanted to drive, which I think is really interesting, and just sort of supplements the other regular call tracking we have had previously. So let's turn it over to our panelists to talk about call tracking and how you've used it. So, you know, how are you driving calls to call centers? or even to stores or physical store locations. I don't know who wants to start.
I guess I'll take it. I'll jump in if you don't mind. So, for those of you out here listening, if you drive a lot of your performance through calls, this one is 100% no-brainer. It is a miraculous addition that you can have for your campaign to really give you the right insights. For one of our financial clients, we had a situation where 75% of all of their leads came through phone. However, when we were optimizing the campaigns at the time, it was based on an online registration form. However, that was not the area where they captured most of their conversions. So by being able to utilize call metrics, what we were able to do was get the right insights in order to understand which campaigns were driving those calls, since we were missing out on 75% of all leads. And by doing that, we were able to grow call leads by 102% just by being able to budget correctly and bid correctly. And so I can't say enough how much of a lifesaver that was in terms of being able to have some really great performance for a client. And if you are a customer that drives calls, you should 100% be doing this today.
Yeah, I would.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I agree. I think whenever we have a client where they say even 15% of conversions of sales come from calls across their business, we want to get call tracking on there. And I guess this is a little bit aside of kind of even the Google considerations here, the Google solutions, but we also have a proprietary tracking system where we're able to actually track calls that resulted in a conversion, whether that be, if it's a lead-based client, that conversion is something different than an actual sale. But that's really important, just like you were saying, RJ, to really see, and we can see back to the keyword level, because, we had a travel client where, maybe if a certain keyword doesn't have a booking, but it has a phone call, that could then turn into an extremely valuable keyword. And so you can really be bidding inappropriately for that keyword if you're missing that call tracking. I would say it's also interesting to think about, catalog marketers or marketers with, companies with an older demographic, that the call tracking and having that call ability easily in the ad is also very important. So that's something that is relevant for some of our clients as well. And we've even had a client too that, kind of through their back end, they've developed a solution to factor in calls and then also tie in cross-device to really see what's the full value of their paid search. So that's been extremely important for them to placing the right value on the right keywords.
Yeah, I think speaking to your earlier point, Phil, where you were saying there are fewer people coming into the store, they're more informed, and you also quoted a statistic about the high percentage of people who are looking to make that conversion as quickly as possible. They're not looking for 2-day free shipping with Amazon, they're looking for something right now. And LIA ads is one way that you can do that. It's engaging with the customer on their mobile phone, and they can go to the website and purchase it. They can go to the store. They can click to call from there as well. They're given the option to kind of engage in the way that they want to, and that's taking advantage of the context of that and then serving up that optimal solution to them. And it's great when you're able to use that advantage as a retailer that does have a store footprint, to take that as a competitive advantage in the marketplace in the ad formats, so that you're taking advantage of the phones. That is not calling a national call center, but you're actually calling the store that's around the corner, or you're looking at the inventory of the store that is around the corner, and you can call to double check that they still have the inventory as the ad is saying, or what have you. So it's great for the retail stores to use that as a way to differentiate from some of the competitiveness of the online landscape.
So that's great. So can you guys say maybe a little bit more about how you're promoting the actual phone numbers with your clients? Like, just in general, are you using them in ads? Are your clients using them in the websites? Both? What's been effective for you, or what sort of strategies have you seen your clients take?
So for the example that I had earlier, that was with the phone number directly within the ad, and I was actually more surprised to see the large extent of performance that we saw coming in. One of the things that I also didn't mention as well is that we, in terms of the quality call information, we had to agree with our client in terms of, with the data provided, what was a quality call, and so we talked with them to determine what length of time that was in order to ensure that we weren't just counting every single call coming in, but we were understanding which calls were the right amount of time that we could allocate that as a conversion, and then also looking into deduping calls if we feel that there could have been someone who called in and then called back again, and to make sure that we weren't counting those calls twice and we were counting them as one conversion. But that was within the ad itself and not directly on the website.
So we do both. I would say often it's on the ad itself, and particularly in mobile, that's I think a no-brainer in many cases. And on the website too, certainly. And if we're dealing with a client that has actually implemented our call tracking technology that allows us to, if there is a sale, actually tie that sale value back to the keyword. Or at least know if something actually resulted in a final conversion, whatever the goal was. So in those cases, they're using the phone number on the website, and then the tracking has been implemented, and it will be, when they talk to the call center rep, there will be a number that they ask the user to read back, and that's how it finally gets all tied together. So a little bit of both.
We found a lot of success in using the phone extension or the location extension tied to the Google Places account, so that as the ad is served up to the customer, they're seeing the phone number for the location that is closest to them, so that they get the most relevant phone number and the best user experience. So that's what we've done to try to ensure that we're driving the most direct way for the business.
That's great. So next, let's talk about, so we talked a bit about measurement of different sort of categories and things like that. I want to spend a couple minutes talking about estimated total conversions and sort of what you can do within AdWords and how you guys have actually used that. So just a quick stat, 93% of people that conduct mobile research go on to complete a purchase of a product or service. So they start the mobile research and then actually convert. So it's interesting that such a high percentage of people are actually converting later on. And so one thing I wanted to really discuss here was what strategies and tools you're using to measure that full journey. And so one of the things that at Google, just to sort of set the stage for around estimated total conversion, so everybody's on the same page, all the people joining online. So estimated total conversions is sort of it's an exciting first step, I think, for marketers to get a lot more insight from AdWords about how they're actually driving conversions, and beyond just the traditional last-click website conversions that are based on the cookies. But here with estimated total conversions, you're able to actually measure a lot more. So you're able to measure conversions that take multiple devices to complete. You're able to measure phone calls, which we just talked about. You're able to measure app downloads, which is really interesting, I think, particularly for a number of businesses who are trying to engage the customers on mobile in a high retention kind of way, and even purchases that happen in the store, which we talked about earlier. So estimated total conversions is relatively new measurement methodology aimed to give you a holistic view of how your business is doing and how you're actually driving those conversions through Google. And this works for both search and display. Sometimes we roll these things out, sequentially, but estimated total conversions is there for both search and display. And I think it's a really important way to assign value, to make budget decisions, and even to think about your different channels. So as you think about media mix and things like that, I think taking that information into account that sort of is a lot more holistic is really interesting. And so for the last few years, really sophisticated advertisers, very much like our panelists today, have been already using this sort of data from a lot of different sources. It used to be really complicated to pull together, but people could do it with enough effort. And so the goal of estimated total conversions is really to make that available to every advertiser and a lot simpler to consume. So, I guess to the question of the panelists, how have you been using this data, and how has it actually driven decisions for your clients? John Mark, you want to start?
Yeah, definitely. I think where this comes in is as you're going out and you're talking to those different teams within the client, and you're using this estimated conversions column to talk about the other ways that you're measuring value, and then trying to get them to compare that to their other marketing channels that are available and see how this one fits into that mix, and then what budgets can be allocated efficiently within this within your AdWords campaign, whether it's display or a search one. Back to some of the previous points, when you're thinking of your last click keywords, that's going to be a certain kind of keyword, and then you have other keywords that are driving the different types of conversions, and those might not be the same mix. So it changes the marketing departments from seeing the channel as something that is specific to them, but looking within that channel as saying, okay, there are parts of this channel that relate to retail, there are parts of this channel that relate to each individual local store, and then there are parts of this channel that relate to e-commerce. So we're seeing that their budgets are actually being divided up not just by, okay, this is a search budget, this is a display budget, but this is a budget used to drive this marketing decision. And it's going to be a mix of things. It could be display and search, or and other ones as well.
RJ, you want to go next?
Sure. So I think just in terms of tackling the situation, a few of our top clients definitely have been utilizing attribution platforms as well as running their own internal media mix analysis projects. And just to kind of give a background for everybody out there, if media mix analysis isn't familiar, essentially what that is that it's a multivariate aggregation of understanding how your spend across channels is impacting your end revenue, and understanding how they relate between one another and can assign value between one another. And so I would always highly recommend is that if you're utilizing an attribution platform, making sure that you're looking into the algorithmic updates. By utilizing the algorithmic values of your attribution model, essentially it's giving you those insights in terms of already taking conversion and splitting it up into many different buckets to assign value to each point in the conversion process. And so as a marketer, this gives you the insight in order to make sure that you're getting value for a program that you're running, especially if it's like a brand display campaign, which we know isn't going to drive that end conversion, but we know that it's driving value overall. And so utilizing an attribution platform makes that tangible. And kind of to your point, Phil, the beauty about the total conversions with Google is that it provides that level or some level of insight across all advertisers, whether big or small. And so we've utilized that data, one, to compare to the performance that we are seeing across some of our bigger clients with algorithm systems, but then also for a client that doesn't necessarily have that, it's been hugely exciting to be able to pull something in there and not to have to dig into data and really analyze the path to conversion analysis, say in Google AdWords, for instance, in terms of making sure that we're understanding exactly how the entire consumer journey is following, and we're kind of getting that number to use readily available. And so that's been very, very helpful for our client teams in making our budgeting, bidding, and also just communications in terms of showing the full value that certain segments of the business are performing.
Yeah, I think kind of a little bit of what I said around cross-device conversions as well, but I think it's very important to make sure that you have the appropriate budgets. And I think, John Mark brings up a great point about not just always having those so siloed by channel too, really looking across and understanding these channels all work together. They don't operate independently. And what will be best for overall company growth is when you see that connection and realize the connection and actually, act on that rather than kind of keeping them all separate. So really, that's what we want to help our clients do, is help them see more of that big picture and really help them put the budget, where it needs to be for the overall growth of their business, not just for the growth of one channel, but to more effectively reach their customer and connect with the customer. So yeah, for us, it's definitely, some of it's directional and then some of it is specific adjustments. So the hope would be that it allows you to set a better budget for the coming year. The hope is that it allows you to set appropriate efficiency targets, and then definitely per campaign, and as you're able to drill down a little bit more than that, even having the right bid adjustment other than just the data that has been previously available for mobile bidding. So that's, I think, sort of a summary of how it's important to us.
So that's great. Can you guys give an example maybe of how you're using the estimated total conversion data in either to inform your bidding, mobile bidding, whatnot, maybe your ad text even, or your budget allocation between different channels and different device types. Can you guys give some examples just of how you've thought about that and how you executed on that?
I think, for us, we've had a couple cases where the client has increased their efficiency target by a certain number of percentage points, particularly for mobile, but that can also, lead you to increase the total efficiency target as well, because the cross-device, isn't just originating from mobile. We've actually seen an interesting situation where desktop has actually been the undervalued channel based on the customer audience. So that's a teenage audience, and particularly if they're searching in a way that shows you that they're already familiar with the brand and trust the site, they've actually been a little more likely to purchase on mobile than on desktop. So it can go both ways. Often, it may result in increasing that mobile efficiency target, increasing those bids as a result. But I think there are cases where it will increase the overall efficiency target as well and show you can get more aggressive while still remaining profitable.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, similar to Rachel, definitely agree with her point there in terms of utilizing this, especially with bid multiplying. We found that very helpful, especially with mobile. What we've seen is that when we've applied total conversions, especially with mobile, we see a higher lift in the total conversions as compared to the converted clicks column. So by utilizing that data, it's making sure that we're associating the right mobile bid and being aggressive in the mobile space, whereas previously it's been hard to sort of make that decision since you might be unsure about what you're getting out of it. So this is really giving you the insights that you can pass back to your client and be like, we did this because we see the value, and it's making those conversations much easier on our side.
Yeah, one of the big benefits of this data being available so easily in the UI, as opposed to being able to maybe do a specific study, as RJ was saying, you can dig into the data and you can always find that path. Mm-hmm. But it's about having it available at the campaign granular level that lets you make a decision. Is this the campaign that is going to drive more in-store people? Is this the campaign that's going to drive more calls? And is this where I need to be playing in mobile at a higher level or at a lower level? And you can balance out, if you follow the math all the way through to an estimated transaction rate and the value of that transaction for the product being searched, you can, similar to how you balance out your costs and your revenue to figure out your position and your rank, you can do that exact same exercise by campaign for your estimated total conversions.
That's really interesting, and those are great examples to talk through and understand. So we're obviously at Google making a lot of effort. We're spending an incredible amount of effort over the last year or so on estimated total conversions and adding new features and new functionality. We just rolled out cross-device for the display network earlier this year. We've had search for a little over a year now. And a number of other conversion types, obviously, too, with calls and apps, etc. But and we continue to work really hard on this. I guess from you guys' perspective, and this is helpful for me in terms of trying to build new products and features. Are there things you guys wish you had here? Obviously, we're not measuring everything yet. I guess what would you wish you could have if you could have anything here?
I mean, if I could wish for anything, it would be to have everything all in one place, constantly updated in real time, which of course that's lofty. But I mean, especially when we talk about media mix analysis, that's always one project that I'm always intrigued to hear what our clients are getting from those, since it's a very in-depth, multivariate view of all of our data across not just online, but also retail store performance. And those products are hefty. They happen about, I mean, varies based on client. And so to have those insights, especially as we continue to shift our strategies, say, if we bid up in mobile, do we still have that same attribution factor as we had the last go-round? Does that still apply? Those insights would be hugely informative in understanding that when we are in a yearly review and taking a look at the year back to understand, could we make the right decisions at the right time, and did we shift our strategy at the right moments? So that would be one thing. If you can get on that, Phil, that'd be great.
I would say, thinking about this, it would be great to have this at the keyword level rather than, just campaign. For us, bidding by the keyword level is extremely important and really, we feel like key to success. And so having that at the keyword level would really allow us to get that much more accurate. I would say also, being able to see the click paths by device would be helpful, certainly. Just understanding a little bit more about the consumer behavior and how that ties to certain segments of the account and how they're searching. And I think one challenge too, and I think John Mark maybe mentioned this early on, is just knowing what's the actual value of that conversion that originated on mobile, because sometimes there may actually be significant differences. So I think if there's a way to assign a value to those cross-device conversions, that would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, while we're putting our requests in, I'll just go ahead and say, let's just go from the impression, we're not even going with a click, let's track it all the way down to the transaction. I know that there are a couple of industry solutions in the works for that, but being able to track it at the granular level all the way to the actual transaction would be the most efficient way to have that full view, because as we know within keywords, similar keywords don't always perform the same way.
I love it, guys. This is great feedback. I mean, it's super helpful for me to hear this stuff. It's definitely stuff that I know myself and my teams as well are definitely prioritizing in terms of building this stuff out. It takes a while, but it's really exciting stuff to get, and I completely 100% agree with all the things I heard, and so it's great to hear that. So just switching gears a little bit, and I think this has been touched on very, very briefly, which I think was interesting. A couple of you mentioned this, but one thing is really about silos, and as we start to bring in all of these different types of conversions, it starts to break down how oftentimes companies who have existed for maybe 100 years or more think about their channels, right? Oftentimes there are very ingrained silos within organizations. And so, just to give you a classic retail silo, you often have a stores team, and their job is to drive sales in the store. You might have a calls team, and they manage the call center and drive those calls that end up signing up or buying things, and then you'll have like an e-commerce team, and these teams tend to not always, and it's great when that's not the case, but oftentimes they're very, very siloed within these larger companies or even sometimes smaller companies, and I guess what would be really interesting is how you guys as agencies have actually tried to manage that, because you're really driving results across the business. How you've dealt with that with clients, I don't know if you guys have experiences with that, but John Mark, you want to start?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we've been talking about is that are we just describing what's going on, or are we actually affecting and changing that path? And so finding success in not just showing like, hey, let me tell you what happened, because that's interesting, but if you're not able to affect that, how far can that business decision go beyond an interesting conversation that people looked at their mobile device before they went to their store. And so it's really about maturing that and turning that into a structured conversation as much as possible, and so that you can show them that you're able to affect change there.
I'll take a step in next. So I guess my recommendation on this would be a simple process. Number one, especially, I'm going to kind of run through a process for, I guess we'll apply it to mobile, theme of the day. Let's say we're coming up with a new campaign for mobile. We need to get secure budget for this, and we're trying to expand our business. And so we want to make sure that we're really showing the full value of what we're going to achieve. So step number one, just take a step back for a second from your day-to-day. Just clear your mind and get ready. Step two, brainstorm. Think about how, one, if putting yourself in the consumer's shoes, how are you going to be utilizing your mobile device as a part of the consumer journey, and how would you make the purchase? And as you go along that process, detail out those points where, is there something trackable there? Could you collect that data in an easy way that you'd be able to apply it to your managing decisions? Step number three is then think about how you can build a measurement strategy around it. Really identify from the list of options of points that you identified before, what are the ones that you really feel that you'll be able to pull in and add together in an easy manner? Since, I mean, first and foremost, I think it's always easy to talk about, oh, I would love to pull in this and that, but at the end of the day, we're all very busy. We need to make sure that whatever we recommend is feasible for our client teams and can be actionable. And so kind of weeding out those areas that nice to have, not realistic, versus the ones that we'll be able to measure. And then once you have all of that, forecast out the opportunity. And so, I mean, as I'm kind of speaking through this, think about just outside of your channel, what are those other points, and kind of as Phil was mentioning, what are other pieces of the business that are going to be impacted by this, and how can we collect that information from those teams, if possible, in order to make sure that when we are providing this recommendation for this new mobile campaign, that they understand the full value that they'll receive from it. And so hopefully, if everything went well, you secured your budget, you're ready to go with the campaign, you've identified your measurement strategy. The next piece is then to understand, once this campaign is launched, applying that back to your original projections. Are things going the way that you expected it? If not, really digging into what are the pieces that are lackluster, or what are the pieces that are overperforming, and really dig into why. And so I think from that, that's kind of what a lot of what we've been doing on our side in terms of making sure that we are pulling all the right people together that will be impacted around this campaign, and then being able to create a measurement plan around it, and then being able to optimize against it has been hugely successful just in terms of our partnerships and in terms of understanding how to run our programs and have a very clear mind about it.
I would say, for us, in addition to some of those things you guys have talked about as well, I think we want to try and model that, internally across our teams here, and really set aside some time, like you were saying, to brainstorm and to just kind of get away from that task list and really just sit there, and it's really great to hear what each other is working on, and that really can spark some ideas. It provides us with just a greater understanding of the client's business as well. But that's one thing that I think we show our clients how we've seen the different channels interacting and be able to come to them with those insights as well.
So that's great, and so I'm just going to wrap up then. Thanks, RJ, Rachel, and John Mark for spending all the time today and talking about how you guys have used estimated total conversions in your business. Obviously, the consumer behavior has changed a lot. It's completely different than it was 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. Very, very, very different and evolving, and it continues to happen, right? So hopefully, estimated total conversions and the products we'll continue to launch at Google will help you, really measure all of those different types of conversions. And as RJ, Rachel, and John Mark talked about today, the ability to measure this and to measure that full ROI is really critical. If you want to understand how your digital campaigns are working, and it's something to really think about as you go into 2015 and think about your budgets and your planning process, forecasting, all these different things. I mean, I think somebody talked about how mobile is growing so fast. You really, it's like hard to even forecast. But it's something to think through. And we'd really love to hear back from the people joining online as well. We're always, I'm personally always really interested to hear feedback about estimated total conversions, what we can do, including what we can do better, and what would be helpful to help you make more informed decisions. So feel free to leave comments on the Google Plus page for the event. And thanks again for tuning in.